I'm attending for him tomorrow. I'm questioning why we
We are
go there. I'm
going to call to order the December 20th, 2023 meeting of the HRA Board. Welcome, everyone, to our final of the year. The first thing on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Anyone?
I'll move to approve.
Motion.
Oh, Chair, apologies. Commissioner Gabler brought up one amendment to the agenda. It's just that Commissioner Hanson was in fact present, and I excluded him.
That's
from-
actually in the minutes,
In the
which is the
minutes.
next thing.
Oh, I apologize, gosh. My brain, okay, you know what, I'm going to wait. The agenda looks fine.
It doesn't show he's absent, but
Sorry.
also not there.
I'm just
Weird, in limbo.
in my last meeting still, so I'm going to,
Okay.
please continue.
It's the story of my life.
I hear a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion of the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, approval of the November meeting minutes with an adjustment
Correct, Chair.
to show Commissioner Hanson as.
I'll move the approval of this.
and
I'll
a se-
second.
And a second. Any further discussion of the minutes of the November 15th meeting?
In a slightly related note, Chair, I will be tallying up attendance for the commissioner compensation at the end of the year.
Oh, the
so
per
it's
diem?
important that Mr. Hanson is indicated as present.
Very good. All right. Any further discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, all those indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We have an opportunity for public comment. We have a visitor with us, Teresa Hayda. Teresa Hayda.
I was
The
like
heck
Hale and
is-
Bida combined, yeah.
I don't know who that is. Teresa Hayda. No comments. Thank you for joining us. We'll move along then to new business. First thing is to establish a $5,000 capitalization threshold. Jason, tell us about this.
Thank you, Chair. So a lot has happened this week. I have a couple of amendments to the agenda under other topics, so I don't need to amend the agenda, but they're mostly surrounding the conversation with bookkeeping and the auditor about 2022's audit. But the reason this capitalization topic came up is because we hadn't formally established one. It's not an issue, but for those of you who are not familiar with capitalization, essentially the question is, what's the dollar amount we want to have as the limit or the trigger point for beginning to capitalize things over time? So the counties, they set a $5,000 amount. I believe the EDA is also $5,000, and we thought let's follow suit and set the same, but just to have a motion to, it's a policy more than it is, we don't need a formal resolution, but just like procurement or anything else, we just want to establish that as a framework. So in other words, any asset that we would purchase in excess of $5,000 would be capitalized over time for accounting purposes. Any questions about that? It's more of a technicality, but we thought, heck, let's just establish it.
Putting on the record, should we move to approve that?
Yes, please.
All right, I'll entertain that motion. All
I'll move to approve the $5,000 capitalization threshold to be consistent with the EDA and county government.
I'll second that.
right, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Then we'll launch into the director's report.
Yes. I apologize in advance, everyone.
You've been busy.
Yeah,
No.
it's been busy. We don't have, the new business obviously is pretty limited this month, but there's a lot of business that just doesn't require a resolution as of yet. So I'll launch by just quickly updating on the Heights. Like I had told the board previously, we have submitted that $750,000 application to IRRR. They're going to be reviewing that in February, at their February meeting. We were hoping to do it this December after talking with staff there. All of the projects that are going to be applying for this new pilot grant that they offer are going in February. at the earliest. We were the only ones that were really ready to go in December, and so they didn't want us to be by our lonesome on the agenda in December, so it made sense to wait until February. So,
This is the pilot for their new housing grants
correct.
program. Okay, got it.
And the indication from staff there is that pending the success of this pilot, which I presume it will be subscribed to and successful, they'd like to probably continue it, which is great news for us. We can continue to ask for funds for that reason. We already have a couple in mind. So the Heights we are working on, actually I just met with, fortuitously, you probably saw downtown the crane that was setting the bakery. So that was, yeah, hard to miss, yeah. It's very hard to miss. It's big and yellow and tall. That was Ideal Homes, and that is the outfit that's looking to do this project, the 36-unit project. So I had a chance to meet with their, I think he's the president, stopped by my office yesterday. We had a great conversation, and we're hopeful and optimistic about doing more work with them to capitalize on other labor to bring up here and then finish it here. So they're the ones as of right now who are working with the Heights crew on the development of that building. And just another quick note, if for some reason the IRRR does not deem it, the board does not approve the request, I should say, for the 750 that we're providing. They could approve less than that in some amount, but if they just outrightly say, no, we don't want to fund this project, then we would, as a backup, we would contemplate applying for Minnesota Housing, their workforce housing development program. And we may have to apply for that in January as a sort of safety stopgap, because the timing is not going to work out perfectly. So we might have to apply for both. And then if IRRR approves, then we'll rescind our application or retract our application. So just FYI there. Which does lead to Bjorkberg, which is in a similar position. We were looking at an IRRR application for infrastructure. This is that 19-unit project, 20-unit single-family project about a block and a half from here. That has been going well. Met with the city a couple of times, met with all of the development crew, feeling pretty good about it. Now they're working on their capital stack. But all of that's to say, IRRR now, anything that's related to housing, they want the applicant to move to the housing program. So we're not actually applying for development infrastructure anymore. We'd be applying for the housing program. And then they can choose to pull from whatever fund they want to. The only reason that's really relevant is because that program specifically has a $5 million allocation this year, and we'll just have two projects applying for the same quote-unquote program. But the timing is such that we don't really have an alternative to that. Their next meeting, I think, is scheduled for June sometime, and so we need to have an answer before then, obviously, so they can start. So that's the update on Bjorkberg.
So you're
Chair?
applying for IRRR housing also for the February meeting?
Correct, Chair. I will bring a
Let me
resolution
make
to the
that
board.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
I just wanted to follow the track there. I wasn't clear.
Yep, yeah, sorry, no, it's kind of
That's
confusing.
okay.
If the Heights crew deem it, we will, once we get the package finalized from them, we will probably end up applying for the workforce housing grant for the Heights, as well as IRRR for both of those two projects. And I just need to bring a resolution in January for either of those or both, if we do both.
Yep. Good.
Cedar Grove, Chair, you can speak to this. Yesterday, the EDA board meeting, this was discussed, and the EDA approved the conveyance of both of those lots to the HRA for $1. I am happy to write that check myself. So the only trick there is that, and Director Bida, who's here with us, could expound if the board has questions, but right now the EDA, we're waiting till they remove the business park covenants from the property. It looks
Amend
like, yeah,
the-
excuse me, amend the business park so that these properties aren't subject to those same requirements. And that will likely wrap up sometime in February, where we would actually convey the property. And frankly, the HRA doesn't really need to own those until after that anyway, because it's too late to do any construction, obviously. The other thing just to mention is that there was a question, and Commissioner Hawkins brought this up, about density, making sure there's an understanding that the HRA does not intend to get these two parcels and then put a house on each of them, for example. Obviously, that's not what we're looking to do. But it was an understandable concern that we want to memorialize, so I recommended at the meeting yesterday that I will draft an MOU that states our intent with the property and agree that this is not going to be two very nice single-family homes on 4 acres or something. That will outline what the intent of the property is, and both the EDA director and I will sign on that MOU and save and share it, so to speak. I wanted any questions or feedback about that, if you have any. Chair, you had your hand up.
So being at the EDA, on the EDA board as well, the intent of the MOU is to state that we will look for a developer who could build as much housing as possible as conditions on the property allow. When we consider, and the economy and the, right.
Well, I would amend that slightly, Chair, just to say, for example, the most that property could support could be, let's just say, 40 units of multifamily housing or something. I haven't done the math, but let's just pretend. It may be the case that we do 12 single-family homes because we're working on 3 other apartment projects, and maybe, so I'd be careful not to say we're going to build as much density as possible, but something that's reasonable for the property that's not, below a certain 4 units or something. We could, if there's a number we want to put there, that's fine. I just don't want to promise to be on the very top side of that.
Yeah, right, that's, I'm sure that you and Director Bida will craft language that is clear and maybe needs to go before both boards for approval before you sign it, or?
That's up to you if you are approving of the spirit of it. It's not a binding, it's an MOU, so
Right.
we're not going to record it against the property. It's just to be transparent and publicly record, this is what we're talking about.
intent.
So
For
if
the
the board
long
wants
term.
to express the intent, I can capture that and send it out for your review before we sign it. That's fine with me.
Commissioner Hawkins, this was your initiative, how are you feeling?
I guess I'm okay with an MOU.
And if
Just
Jason
to
and
have it part
Teresa?
of the record that what our intent is. And the reason I brought this up is I totally trust you guys to do the best you can to get housing for our community. But I've lived here all my life, and boards change, people change, and people forget what came before. And I just wanted it recorded in writing that the intent for these 2 lots is for housing and not just one house or whatever. But I trust this board to make the best decision of what houses, what type of housing should be on there.
And I appreciated, Commissioner, you bringing that up yesterday, because obviously I wasn't, that's from the EDA's perspective, right? Trying to make sure that they're getting out of it what they put into it. But I also appreciate having a reference point, coming into the community, and I can, sure Director Biden can attest, there's a lot, even this particular property, there's been lots of conversations over time, and it's not as easy to point to, like, what exactly was the deal? Yeah. So I'm more than happy to draft it if the board's comfortable with us doing that to establish a sort of baseline and intention rather.
I don't know if this is the right time to raise this, but I guess a concern I have is that we don't have a lot of visibility as these, as the housing developments are going in. We, the HRA board, don't have much visibility to the decisions that are being made about the efficiency of those units, the kind of systems that are being put in, and what the long-term environmental impact is going to be of those buildings. And obviously, up front is the most cost-effective time to address those concerns. And I don't want to be, I recognize that our mandate is to put in as much housing as possible. I don't know, and I guess I'm thinking about it, I'd be more comfortable if there was some step in the process that said early on, we intend to use propane furnaces or something, then we could have a conversation. Because we're in a period of a lot of flux in terms of the available technologies. There's a lot of newer technologies that are not, a lot of contractors may not be familiar with. There's new incentive programs, and so I think having more eyes on that piece of the puzzle, would be a good idea to make ourselves comfortable that we're not only building a lot of housing, but we're doing it in the most sustainable and economically viable way possible. And so I don't know where in the process that would be best to ask the developers that maybe in return for our assistance in getting funding from IRRR, we expect we expect them to report back to us as early as possible at some point in the process what the intents are for what the long-term environmental impact is going to be of that property, and how is that benchmarked against other options.
I would add to that, not only is it, environmental impact, I look at it from the affordability point of view. If you look at the numbers, there's no better thing you can do for affordability than make them energy efficient. Any living space over time, it's hugely important. And also there are a lot of resources available, so maybe we can get ourselves educated on those resources and help developers to tap into those to make that happen. Because it's a big gift to the community to make those, and to the eventual owners and renters to make those energy efficient as possible.
Couple of thoughts on that.
Please.
Point well made, and I have done some thinking about this, Commissioner, trying to figure out for quick background, it's interesting, the county has not actually adopted International Building Code. Which in some ways allows us to be creative with things like shipping container homes, or like trying things that aren't as easily done in other communities. On the other hand, one of the challenges I think is going to be, to what standard are we holding, what is the metric and how are we measuring it? If we don't have it in a building code, and if we're not requiring, for example, someone to be LEED certified or to be a LEED certified building or something like that, which is a pretty substantial threshold, right? And I know that's not what we're contending for every property. I think, to answer your question, Commissioner O'Brien, the best place, from my perspective, where to put that is in the development agreement. And that's something that I would be transparent about with the developer as these projects come up.
Yep.
By the way, we have a vested interest in the community as trying to make these as efficient as possible and taking advantage of new technologies that exist.
Right.
I would hesitate to require that they do X, Y, Z, but I would be happy to put in the development agreement. We will have a conversation about what those things are, and you are willing to work with us on that. Good example is Switchback. I just today got all of their electric load calculations because they're working with the city on doing an all-electric facility. That would not have happened without they were planning on doing propane, and right. So to your point, that doesn't happen unless we sort of have that conversation.
Yeah, I think we don't have a standard to hold them to, and we're not a standard-making body. But what we can do, and I think it will happen of its own accord, if there's a requirement that that those decisions are transparent, and because I think anyway, that opens the opportunity for a conversation, and I think that we have something to work with if we see a need for a conversation about it.
How would you envision the review happening?
I think that as part of the development, I would envision that the development agreement would say that for something that would be shared with the board would be, this is the developers just submitted, here's what their report is and what their planned energy efficiency measure, energy performance of this energy systems are going to be in this building, and this is how that compares to other options. And then it would simply be a report out. We would have it as something to read about in preparation for our meetings. And if there were concerns about it, that could be maybe that we could request a meeting with the developer and just better understand what their decision-making process is.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Well, to tag on, one of the points Commissioner O'Brien made initially is really key. This is an area that technology is changing fast, and I'm interested in people who've got more invested in this than I do, knowledge-wise or money-wise, to come up with solutions. And so the fact that we don't have standards per se isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the review is what's critical, is just, gee, have you thought of this? Or, we saw some, a development use this technology and it improved the operating efficiency. I mean, those are really key things. And I've been involved in enough real estate project development to know that the budgets are static, and the first things to get cut a lot of times are things that would make the difference in the long haul for the occupants in their rents or their cost of doing business. And So it's a great point to make, that we ought to have those conversations, and it's a good point that we have some flexibility here too.
I think one other thing I would add would be that we stage that reporting requirement to be at a point in the development process where everything's not set in concrete.
Yeah.
So just, it would be at an early enough stage that there's opportunity for a conversation and some decisions to be changed, and the orders haven't already been placed for the propane furnace.
Right. Well, Commissioner, if you're not opposed, I like this conceptually. I'd like to think about it a little bit and figure out how to best structure it. And then I would really like, if whoever is interested, but if you're willing to have a conversation, we can talk through.
Love that.
Because the thing I want to make sure of, as you probably recognize, is I want to balance our ability to get the best thing we can for the residents and community as possible, especially if we're providing, that's our leverage is we're providing this assistance. So what can we get out of that? At the same time as not overburdening the property or requirements from the developer. So that's the sweet spot, and I think we can find it. So if you're willing to work with me on that, we'll get some ideas together and I'll figure out how to incorporate that language.
Absolutely. No, I think this should be viewed, this should not be viewed as something that's hostile to the developers. I mean, this is really just a measure for transparency and potentially, and I think just the transparency alone will shift things in the right direction.
Yeah, and to your point, well, Commissioner Gebler, you just mentioned this. You've worked on enough real estate deals to know that the developer is going to look at it as a line item and see how much it costs and say, essentially, if you're willing to pay for it, we'll put it in. Otherwise, it will get quote-unquote value engineered out of the project. So
Value engineering, what a statement.
that's what they call it.
I know.
So I think if we can broach it as more of a partnership conversation with them and make sure that they're aware of these opportunities, I'd love to be able to do that. So I just want to be tactful and tactical about how we do it.
Yeah,
So
and I think what Commissioner Hanson started with, I think would be a good way to introduce the conversation. I mean, our expectation is that, these are long-term investments in the community, and this is, it's our expectations. This is for the long term, environmentally, an environmental posit as beneficial and affordable, so that's our interest.
And we can put up a tent for a couple $100. But heating it's gonna break you. So that's the far extreme the other way.
Right.
But,
Right.
and I think there's an argument to be made that a developer, by making their offering energy efficient, increases the value and desirability to the customer ultimately. So.
yes, absolutely. The tension is making sure that you can do that that doesn't increase the price to outprice our emission.
Yeah.
That's always the years I've been working on this. It's always what it rubs up against. So
Less and less of an issue.
as the technology improves and as more people are comfortable implementing it, that's another big thing is contractors' comfort with it. But yeah, so I'm happy to think more about that. And Commissioner, I'll reach out if that's okay, and we can brainstorm.
Yeah, would love that.
Terrific.
Would love that. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, just quick, I am planning on the MOU with the EDA and other acronyms, and if you're okay with that, okay, I see nods, great. Birchwood Apartments, if you haven't heard or known, the MHFA approved $10.5 million for the renovation of that property. Very excited about that. Go ahead.
10 and a half.
10.5.
Oh, I never saw the correction. I saw the headline said corrected, but I saw 6 and a half. It's 10 and a half.
Oh,
Was it-
that's great, because it says here 525.
Yeah,
the
that's what I
paper.
read.
525.
That's what I read.
525 is what it says in the paper.
No.
Oh.
Well, there were different ways that it was presented and stuff I saw. One was the total cost of what's going to happen. The other was what's coming from the state, and we should take a look at it. But yeah,
My understanding is the whole project is 10.5.
yeah,
Um,
that sounds right.
And I'm just pulling it back up here. I don't want to belabor the point. Either way, it got approved.
Good stuff, for sure.
Yeah, so
It's
I,
excellent, yes, and thank you for bringing
Yeah.
that partnership together from the start and tracking it to this.
that's my job. But honestly, to chair,
Attaboy.
happy to do, I'm thrilled to do it. And this is an example of why having someone who can help shepherd some of these things, even though it's not our funds, like making those connections, meeting all the parties together, can be critical. I don't know, and the state doesn't know, and the developer didn't even know about this property, and there was no backup plan. Because the needs are so high that there just wasn't a realistic alternative. So we're thrilled. I talked with Jeff Corey, the executive director, this week, congratulating him congratulating us, all those things. And also saying good luck, because One Roof got a lot of funding, $62 million this year.
Yes.
And I said, don't get too busy, I have more work for you. So we're all thrilled. Actually got a call from a tenant there yesterday asking to confirm, I read this headline and I just want to make sure this isn't like a hopeful thing, that it's actually happening. I said, no, barring some, force majeure, act of God stuff, this is going to happen. Oh my gosh, I'm going to buy candy for the group or whatever. So,
Nice.
so they're thrilled to have some sense of stability, and that the safety of that building is secured for 40 years, is my understanding. So 40 years is a long
And
term.
that's so key because it's the only subsidized family
Correct.
housing in Cook County that's
Yeah.
really got the deep subsidies, and
Yep.
if we'd have lost that, it would be tragic.
Incredibly good news.
Yeah, so I just wanted to celebrate. Thank you for support.
Yes,
Remember-
everyone raise your sparkling water in
Here, here,
celebration of
Cheers.
that.
Cheers. And I just want to again remind the board that you made this possible. One Roof would not have done it without the grant and the deferred loan that you approved. So I just want to, we're not doing all of the work by any stretch of the imagination, but I just want to say that like those critical milestones, we played a big role in this, in your approval of those funds, so they could afford to actually apply for the money. So just thank you. And part of the reason why a lot of our leverage can be playing that background role and not taking the whole ownership of the project. But if we can make important connections, we can keep doing it. So thank you.
And don't we also owe some thanks to the county itself for the ARPA money that we were able to
Absolutely.
allocate that way? So thank you, county commissioners, for doing the right thing.
Exactly, yes.
And in addition, Commissioner, to that, the agreement, I'll remind you, is if they get funded, we get some of that $250,000 back. So now we can roll that into another effort. And so it keeps going.
What is our plan for getting the word out about this?
It's posted on, so I posted it on, well, it jumps ahead a bit here, but I posted it on our website after the strategic plan conversation we had. If you go to our front page, it posts a recap of the efforts this year, including Birchwood. Yeah, and it's been in the paper and it's been on the news, and I mean, you shared an article from the Star Tribune, so.
I would imagine you'll be interviewed by WTIP
Tomorrow.
That's
and
what I'm
that'll
wondering,
be
Tomorrow I'm interviewing with them.
one of
Okay,
the,
thank God. That was just.
Oh, sorry, I was-
That kind of, the low-hanging fruit, the WTIP, Boreal.
Yep.
Just make
The
sure that
local.
we're just getting the word out
Ironically, it
and all
was-
those media
it was
outlets.
buried in the back pages of the Duluth News Tribune.
It was on they rotated it to the front of the online,
Yeah.
so it got its 15 minutes of fame or whatever.
Very
I think
brief.
just the story about, I think just telling the story about how this is a unexpected problem that sort of landed in our lap, and it was
Yeah,
outside of the
story.
scope of what we were originally planning to do, and yet we were able by the end of the year to fix the problem. I think
Put that
it's just a
together.
really,
It's important to highlight that, I think.
yeah, I think for the credibility of the HRA itself, I think it's a
Don't
good
forget to
opportunity.
mention the land trust projects in the county, too.
The One Roof Land Trust project?
Yeah, to give people, because people have forgotten that they were involved with
yeah, I
that.
was gonna,
Make sure you know,
Remind them that
remind
they're
them
this-
of their history and their good works here.
I was gonna bring that point up exactly, Commissioner Hanson. One Roof was here in 2017, 18, 19, I don't know, when they built the 10 homes at Nordic Star in Grand Marais, which is a community land trust, and the 16 workforce apartments in Lutzen, which are fully occupied and rented. And it was an incredibly, those projects were incredibly complex for them because of the distance from their home, where their workers live, where, their staff put out great effort to get that done here in Cook County, and I can't thank them enough. I doubt that anyone from One Roof is watching this today, but I would like
Of course
us
they are, Chair.
to send, I would like us to send a written card or letter or an email from this board to to Jeff Corey, thanking him for coming back to Cook County
Yeah.
and helping us again, because I don't know how else this would happen without his stamina and determination to do what he does with with One Roof. So if you could craft that message and send it on behalf of the board and sign all of our names,
I will,
I'd support that.
please.
okay. I was going to say it's not plagiarism if you consent, right? So you're all okay with me
Yeah.
signing it?
Yes,
Please do.
Okay.
thank you.
Happy to do so. Commissioner, you're going to say that?
I was going to make a comment that by now you probably are familiar with AI, and you could just have AI do the letter.
Oh.
I'd rather have
Right
you
now.
do it. Yeah.
Funny you mentioned that. I was actually yesterday doing a little research into how we could use AI to work on our behalf. Not clear yet. Government takes a little longer. But actually, a good segue here is I am talking with, again, we're going to be getting some of that money back, the deferred loan, and I'm talking with One Roof about their property right next to Nordic Star, the potential for a fall 2024 application for the Workforce Housing Development Program.
Nice.
And this is all tied to building a development infrastructure takes a while, but it pays dividends. And so, for example, in this case, the Heights is a modular project with Ideal. I mentioned that. Ideal is also working on a project called Plover Place in Duluth for One Roof that I also happened to work on 3 years ago. And they're now looking at talking with Ideal to do a project here based on the success of the Heights and how that goes. And maybe the $250,000 we get back could be rolled over into a project for the workforce housing project that they're contemplating. So there's sort of kind of build a foundation, and these things the model proves itself. So their staff and I are working closely in looking at numbers and figuring out how to make that math work, but the application's in the fall for the second round of this program. And we're trying to figure it out, put our heads together.
Excellent.
So they haven't given up, and I'm trying to compel them to not give up on that property, but yeah, we'll continue to work on that. Temperance Trails, that was approved at Planning Commission, and then also yesterday what's today? Yes, yesterday, sorry, gosh. At the Cook County Board, the regular board meeting, it was a conditional use permit for the project you're all familiar with that we're working on, the 20 to 24 unit deal. I just met there on site actually this morning with the surveyor. We walked around where the school's campsite area and shed are, and we put up perimeter flags, and he actually just sent a couple minutes ago the sketch of where that outline is. So we're establishing an easement so that the school has the right to continue to access that for the kids.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that will be moving forward. Either way, that easement will be established. If for some reason this development fell through in particular, we'd still have an easement there for the use for the school. Any questions about that at all? It's just kind of a quick update on that project.
That's some good magic going on there.
Yeah, it's going to be lovely.
That'd be great for the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in my idealized mind world, I see kids playing there that also live next door, that can walk to the school, and the grandparents take, it could be a really cool
That's
thing.
how it'll work.
Yeah.
Basically replaces Taconite Harbor, which is why they built that school.
For the kids of the employees of TAC Harbor.
That little
When there were
that little development there.
40 houses there back in the day.
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
right.
This is better because they can walk to school.
Yeah.
Yes, very easily. It's about 150 feet. So Harborview, I did just want to provide this update. I met with HUD, multiple representatives from HUD. As you know, this is, I guess, sort of Birchwood 2.0 as far as, these projects that come to the community's sort of social consciousness very quickly, and there's a lot of concern. Fortunately, this building's in a much better shape physically, but HUD and I are working, so I met with Minnesota Housing, I met with all of the government acronyms and agencies, trying to figure out how we can entice the current ownership to maintain the level of affordability. There's no legal means, obviously, to compel them to do it. It's more of a negotiation conversation. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of, I have not identified, according to these outfits, any resources that they would provide to invest in that property to bring it up to snuff, so to speak, for deferred maintenance, without them signing a long-term affordability contract, which I understand, but the new owner is not inclined to do. So, still having a conversation with the owner, about ways we could bring other resources, whether something like, just hypothesizing here, like tax abatement on that property, if they are willing to have a contract to accept Section 8 for X number of years, those sort of arrangements. And in a backup, what I also learned from HUD, which is very interesting, HUD has basically budgeted line items for every property. So they will pay what's called a payment standard, a certain amount for a certain room size. So it's a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. And by county, they establish this is how much they can charge for rent. And so in other words, this is how much HUD will cover per unit. That building has approximately $27,000 a month that HUD has as a budget. That's how they look at these buildings. They have the ability, with probably lots of paperwork, to transfer that budget to another facility if that owner did not want to continue renting it to Section 8 tenants. So what I am working on is with new projects that we're contemplating, how can we bring that budget potentially over to those new projects? And it would not replace all 31 units, but maybe 18 or 20 or whatever the math allows, to have some homes kept where they can move right in to that new facility. So just to put on, like, if you hear this come up, I hope you'll hear more about it, because it means I'm getting some traction, but that's a sort of matchmaking exercise I'm exploring. And that's something that One Roof and I, for example, are working on, a potentially their workforce project that we're exploring. So,
Can you just help me understand that a little further? So if you were going to do it with One Roof for the workforce project, then One Roof would contract with HUD to accept this HUD reimbursement or rent reimbursement in return for some commitment to keep those as affordable for some period of time. Okay.
they would essentially enter into a 20-year contract to keep the rents, to accept those Section 8 vouchers for X number of units,
Got it.
with whatever that budget buys for the rents that they have to charge. Okay. So for new buildings, the unfortunate reality is in this case, 27,000 is not going to get you 30 units. It can't, because it's too expensive to build them. But maybe it can get you 20 or 18 or something like that.
Got it.
You know, I would also think there's kind of a leverage there with the new owners. That project is, nicely located and everything else, but it's not a high-end apartment project, and they're not going to put the resources in to make it that. And to lose 27 grand of income is, I really think that's worth, they're thinking about it, I'm sure of that. And they'd like to use that as leverage to get as much money as they could to help them renovate the property. That's part of the negotiation going on. And, we don't have a lot to bring to that at this stage. But it's in the back of my mind, I'm thinking they may not want to let that 27 grand go that quickly, even though they do have to, they're going to make some investment in the property. It just, I'm thinking out loud here, but.
Well, Commissioner, you bring up something that's really important to clarify for the board and for the public. The owner has not said that they won't continue.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to come up with a plan B or C in the event that they don't, because this is 31 units that are really important, that are Section 8. And to be clear, One Roof has not, we're just exploring possibilities of conveying or basically transferring that contract to another property. These are just possibilities, but I wanted to put it on your radar that this is maybe potential, and obviously it's a small community, and if you could think of another building or somebody who has units who would be willing to accept some, then maybe we could split, there's a way to split that contract and like take 12 here and 15 here or something like that. But to be clear, they haven't said no, the new owner hasn't explicitly said we've decided we are not doing the contract and nothing you say will convince us. I'm still hoping that that's the outcome. But given that they purchased the property with not having that in mind, I want to be somewhat pragmatic about if they don't. Yeah, and also they have about $500,000 of maintenance that was identified that they need to take care of. And so with the current rents that they're charging, the reserves are not sufficient enough they have to increase rents or not make so there's got to be something. Even if it was the case that we were to assist with some of those deferred maintenance items, and then they agreed to keep X number of units there and accept those. One other thing worth mentioning is, once the contract flips and is no longer in place, so July 1st of 2025, the current tenants get what's, without going too deep in the HUD weeds, called an enhanced voucher, which can pay a little bit more, and ideally, they have a right to stay there if that voucher pays what the landlord is asking for rent. If it doesn't, then they have to relocate. But if they don't make a bunch of improvements, to your point, and hopefully by that point we have maybe 1 or 2 other new projects in town, and the owner's going to say, well, I can't, they're for this much money they're getting a brand new facility, and whatever amenities, I can't charge as much as I thought I could charge or something. So there's a lot of variables to moving in the air, but.
And that's why we're paying you the big bucks, is to stay on top of that stuff. And you're doing it, and that's really great.
18 months will go by quickly.
Yeah.
So, that's all I have for harbor review. Any questions about that? That was some fun HUD stuff. I learned a lot from that confusing conversation with HUD, so I wanted to share with you. Okay, Schroeder RFP. We all know, this was issued October 17th. It is due Friday. Unsurprisingly, I have not had any submissions. I do not expect to get any submissions. When I visited the site and talked with builders and developers, this was a useful exercise for me either way. It corroborated kind of what we've talked about. 2 things came to the surface every time. One, it's too wet. Which you don't know until you do it's why it's so important to have these pre-development dollars. It's too wet, and it's too far. So the reality is, for any scaled multifamily building, unless it's on a prime piece of property, maybe with a lake view or whatever, right? Then people are willing to figure it out. This is a great spot, but it's just too far from the core. It's too far from services. It's really not that far, but it feels far. And so there just wasn't an appetite. And the local builders that I talked to said, it's too far from Grand Rapids. And the people from out of town said, how much is it? How big of land is it? This big. How many houses could we get in there? Well, showed them the wetland map there, said, you got any other property? So, so barring, some sort of magical submissions in the next 2 days, which I've seen happen in RPs, last minute submissions, that could be cool. It will probably come back in January and visit not extending this and maybe turning it back to, not exercising the option and giving it back to Minnesota Power.
So I have a question. Doesn't Minnesota Power own a lot of land around there?
They do.
And maybe share this feedback with them and say, maybe you could offer us a little more desirable piece of land to do this?
I have talked to them about that. The reason that this land was selected is because it's actually the closest that's not right next to Tack Harbor, where they're not willing to talk about giving land. Because they're decommissioning the plant. They have to do some environmental investigating and potentially mitigation. So some liability reasons. Because I looked at the map, I pulled up the GIS, which is, they probably have, if they can track my time on there, they're like, who's using this thing all the time? But, looking at all of their property, this was the closest to the highway because they have a bunch of property that's further west. They have several hundred acres, but it's even further away.
Yeah.
So if they'd be willing to talk about closer property, I'm all ears.
Maybe eventually, but at least so they know what the issues are.
Back when I was planning commissioner, dozens of years ago now, but they came to us with a plan for, Minnesota Power did, do you know about this? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty extensive, an equestrian resort concept.
For this property up by Dyer's
The
Lake?
whole thing,
Because there's so much property there.
so much property.
Yeah.
It was an exotic idea.
It was. Very, very ambitious.
Yes. Didn't happen.
They don't own it, but I think that railroad should be turned into a scenic, there railroads all over the United States now that have electric hand cars or pedal cars
Oh, yeah.
that people rent out. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is like a going business. In dozens of places. It started in Europe. And that one would be ideal because it's incredibly
Super huge
scenic.
loops.
And then when you get to the top, you go through a half-mile super spooky tunnel. And then it could turn around and come back. That would be a real business for somebody. I
Well-
keep trying to get people interested. I don't want to do it.
Do you have your slide deck that we can take a look at your proposal?
You can look at, just look it up online. Just look up, there's a.
Oh, I've seen other operations.
Yeah, there's
doing
a
it.
chain, I think, that's out there that.
Well, it's,
But Cliffs owns the railroad.
Commissioner, I would direct you to the director of the EDA.
Get that going, would you?
Would be happy to start that business.
I think, Cliffs obviously held that railroad thinking that that power plant would be
Yep.
used to power Polymet. Well, now that seems to be no longer
Right.
on the table. They haven't said as much, but they're planning to tear it down, so the railroad becomes essentially useless. So now might be the time to
Yeah.
try to get somebody interested in that.
I think it will particularly, if and when they demolish the structure and it becomes very visibly clear that Minnesota Power has no investment in that property, Cliffs will have no use to keep
Right.
that railroad.
Right.
So it might be a little bit of a domino effect there.
Yeah.
But I know people are very interested in Tag Harbor, and I know that will be a continued conversation in the community.
And does Minnesota Power own the old home site there?
I'm
Is that-
sure they do, yeah.
Is that their land?
Where they
think it
platted
is.
the.
Where the
yeah,
houses
yeah.
used to be?
The ghost town, yeah.
The ghost town, because ever since I've been thinking about housing in Cook County, since I came back here 7 years ago, I've been thinking, and it's probably, I'm oversimplifying it, but there were streets and houses, there was water and septic, we know where the rocks aren't, we know that it's not wetland, so wouldn't it make sense to go in and dig up the old infrastructure, put in new infrastructure, build new houses?
It's a good
Like,
spot, yeah.
It feels to me like, and when I would talk about it back when I was at the EDA, people would say to me, well, nobody wants to live by the power plant. Now I understand we have to wait until they do their contamination, their
Yeah,
cleanup,
that's
their,
sure.
but I want, it just feels like a no-brainer to me. I don't know,
I think once they get that,
so,
the pollution thing
yeah.
quantified, then
Yeah.
that would be a really good place for it.
Yeah.
Because it's not high on Lake Shore. You can't really
Right.
see the lake from there,
Right.
but it's convenient to everything, and as you say, has the
I think I've seen
the
it.
proven infrastructure works there, and yeah. it's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Assuming there isn't a lot of remediation that needs to be done.
On that part of the property, right. But anyway,
And if it does, maybe we could, I mean, that's something we could assist with, and I know.
we can get a brown site
Yeah, we could, Brownfield.
from deed and IRRB
Well,
and,
for sure. It would just come down to the extent and all those things, but
Yeah.
they have a lot of potential property there for sure.
yeah.
But understandably, they're a little bit, they're waiting until they have a better understanding of the picture.
Yep, no, I get that, but I just want to keep that site on our list of potentials, because it just feels, well, I don't know, simple thoughts from a simple mind, but it feels like
It worked very well. It was a very vibrant community
makes sense.
at one time.
And before we leave the shorter RFP, Jason, I just want to thank you for the process that you did with this, that you did the RFP before we exercised the option, because then what would we do with that property if we couldn't find a developer? So thank you for your thoughtful process.
You're welcome, Chair. And just a last button on that is that there's a community group out west called the West of the county, West End Connect.
Yeah.
And they've expressed interest in this property too. And Commissioner Gabler, I know you've been on some of those emails as well.
Oh,
And they were asking if we could facilitate basically a transfer of this option to them, and I told them that, no. But we can tell Minnesota Power that they're interested, and if, once we kind of terminate the agreement or the option with Minnesota Power or Elite, then that West End Connect, if they can have that conversation.
can make that introduction.
And if we could be helpful and, make an introduction, if we can be helpful and some supportive information or whatever, great.
Okay.
But just to let you know that that community is still interested in this site to try to build affordable housing. And if they can do it, fantastic. I wish them luck.
They do seem pretty committed to that idea and willing to commit some resources. The town board has been pretty active, and I was impressed that they came back and said, gee, if you can't do anything, we'd like to, have some shot at it, undefined and all that, so we'll see. But,
Cool.
yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, Romanet 8, account transfer. So this is one of the other topics that I mentioned that had come up. There's a lot that happened, that's happening. One is, we have requested, we're moving Carl Hansen has started in his capacity. I have met with him multiple times and with the auditor at Redpath. And welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're here for the HRA board meeting?
Is that this?
Yes.
Yes.
I am now.
Welcome. So the account transfer is that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay. No, you're fine, you're fine. Carl Hansen has started, we met multiple times. We have set up the QuickBooks access. Now Commissioner Gabler has access to that as well. Lucky him. We also have given access to, there's one, auditor, the Redpath. So all of this is to say, I learned yesterday, last night, from the auditor that FDIC insurance, which I'm sure you all know, covers $250,000 worth of deposits in any account in the United States. Statute requires, Carl and I both learned this together, statute requires that anything above and beyond that, that a public entity has in an account has to get collateral insurance, or another form of insurance, basically. And institutions do not have to agree to provide it. So I learned that the EDA moved its accounts to Grand Marais State Bank, in part because of that, because North Shore Federal Credit Union does not provide that. So we have a couple of options. One is we could open a savings account at another institution, because our current accounts that we opened were North Shore Federal Credit Union. And I met with them today and yesterday to talk through some of this. We can open a savings account somewhere else where we have, this sort of one-time American Rescue Plan funds and deposit it there. Even then, we'd have to open a couple of accounts because we're getting a chunk from the auditor for the county. Or we would just have to transfer our accounts to another institution who does provide that insurance. My recommendation is, unfortunately, to just transfer the funds so that we're not keeping track of multiple bank accounts and we can tie one account to QuickBooks. But I wanted to put that on your radar and answer any questions about that whole situation. It would have been nice to know that ahead of time, but live and learn, they say.
Yeah. Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, totally reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, it would be nice in a small town to be able to utilize both, but why make your life and Carl's life and Commissioner Gabler's life, the Finance Committee, it's adding complexity that we don't need, so I think everyone's nodding in agreement to go ahead and follow the path of least resistance.
Well, Chair.
Be like water.
Yeah, go where the river flows. Chair and Vice Chair, you should be pros. We did this once. We're going to do it one more time. And setting
Go
up the
sign it
account.
then.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
go sign. And the ambition here is to get this all squared away so that in January we can get a check from the county, deposit it in a new account, and then all charges will come from
Everything will flow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
very good, thank you.
You are welcome. On that subject, the audit will be, I asked for it for this meeting, the HRA's 2022 audit. It is intrinsically tied under the county's audit, where basically a page. It will be available the second week of January with the rest of the county's audit. Having said that, there were no findings. So we got a clean bill of health as far as they're concerned. Yeah. Well, we're pretty simple right now. So.
There wasn't much to do.
No, he said, this is great.
There better not have been any findings.
Yeah, no findings. And we're going to keep it that way, darn it. So you'll see the county, when you want to see ours, you'll see it with the rest of the county's audit.
Great.
Very good.
The only other thing in the finance world is to say that the county has graciously offered to continue, just as they do with the EDA, to do our payroll, because that's a whole other space. And that's going to, they charge $500 a year. I figured that wasn't too steep a price.
Terrific.
So we're going to sign up for that program. But I just wanted to let you know, we have worked out with the auditor and with our bookkeeper how we're going to handle the transfer of those funds and to make sure that, and that I believe that the county basically does a reimbursement request to the EDA quarterly. Because they pay out payroll and then they say, hey, it's been 3 months.
And then
Their EDA writes a check to reimburse them. So if there's not any opposition to that, that's the intent, is to mimic that.
perfect.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Auditor Powers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just sounds fine.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. Okay, that's all the fun financial stuff. We're getting close to the end, folks. Strategic plan. That was just to remind the board that we had that exercise. I took your feedback. Thank you. It is now posted. The updated version is online. So if you go to our website, it's the first thing you'll see. Like I said, highlights efforts to date, what we've accomplished, and then also there were a couple of minor edits that the chair had caught that she wanted to make on the front, just to corroborate how we're going to handle this moving forward, as we talked about last time, annual reviews in December of the strategic plan. So that's up for the community to look at. Other than that, two quick updates just for you. I had a really interesting meeting last Friday, was it? It's the septic conversation. Yeah, it was here in this room. And the contractors, excavation and septic contractors from across the county came. It was brokered by the land department. And the intent was to ask, the county has an opportunity to get a mapping of aggregate pits and aggregate supply in the county. And I think it's Minnesota DNR who is doing that effort across the state. The assumption was, from the land department going into it, that there was insufficient sand. And we could talk, there's a lot apparently we could talk about sand, more than I knew. But without going, yes, it's a very complicated, deep subject and lots of people with knowledge and passion. What I will say that was surprising is that what I heard is that sand actually isn't the problem. We have enough sand in the county. Although one asterisk is our sand is coarser sand than most of the rest of the state because we're special. And we have a lot of bedrock. So we have coarse sand, which there are MPCA requirements for how granular the sand needs to be to do septics and mounds, and the type of sand that's used for concrete. Long story short, it was really interesting to hear from the contractors themselves. The real problem is not so much sand, it's that the market hasn't proven the demand sufficient for them to expand, to invest. I think it was a minimum of $1.2 million in an operation to be able to produce more sand. So we're at this weird inflection point where if there's enough demand, then they can justify the investment. As it is now, the sand that we have currently, and most of it this last year was actually at Isaac Hansen's in Lutzen. That's where they produce that fine grain stuff. That's probably going to be the go-to, and Thorson's is slowly sort of shutting down in Grand Marais. So it was really interesting to hear from them. So Director Biden and I we came out of it saying, well, we have a workforce problem, because the two problems were sand is there's not enough demand, apparently. That might change if all these projects happen. There's going to be more demand. There's not enough demand to justify the infrastructure or the investment, and even if there was, there's not enough people to do the job. So the biggest challenge that all of these, and I think there were probably 8 different shops probably accounted for, they all said, the problem is there are all these smaller outfits that have 2 or 3 guys running in them. They don't have enough. They are trying to, they don't have the people they need. They need a dump truck, but they don't need it running all the time. But they need somebody who's classified to drive the dump truck. And so they need a sort of jack of all trades. All of them need the same person, and there's not enough of that person. So we have a workforce issue, which we all knew about, but it was really interesting to hear in that context. And the reason it's relevant for us is because that sand is also used for concrete, which we've already had experiences with challenges with projects we're doing. And they don't see that there isn't really a concrete mixer in the county that is big enough to do the projects we need. So I'm just basically saying it's doom and gloom. That's not doom and gloom. It's really helpful, at least I think, to understand, boots on the ground work is saying this is the problem. We thought it was this. How do we help connect these dots? And so there's more work to be done there, but it was a really helpful meeting to attend. So lastly, before one other piece of good news, Visigood County, I spoke at their board retreat last week. It was very interesting. They just got a report back from their, I think, University of Minnesota Extension Office. They had contracted them to do an economic impact report of tourism. They came up with the number of 40% of the economy is tourism, which is about half of what is normally talked about. And so people.
It depends on how you measure that.
Correct.
That's direct, right?
Yeah, they're
That's
saying.
direct.
Well, no, they're saying total. And the reason why, yeah, everyone in the room, Commissioner, had the same look on their face, like, that's not right. And the reason why is because government services included in that category is the entire Grand Portage tribe, their casino, like, the boundary waters, the state parks, all of that is in one bucket. And you can't, like, there's no way to divorce that from I mean, that is tourism and recreation. So
Again, that's just how you talk about it.
exactly. So they've agreed, the University of Minnesota agreed to go back to better flush that out. But we talked a lot about the projects we're doing and also demographics. And at some point, I'll email you. I created a demographic pyramid for Cook County, and there are reasons to be aware of it and also trying to address it. It will create, it's already creating some pressure points as we feel, but that's a whole other diatribe. The last thing I'll say is Lloyd K. Johnson and I have been talking since Eric Torch started. I think he's the new director. And they've been trying to figure out a way to support our work. And either Monday or late last week, they invited us to apply for $50,000. For 25 of which to benefit the Heights project in pre-development and 25 to use for general pre-development costs. So I applied for it Monday night. And so we'll find out in early January, I believe. But I suspect it was at their request and invitation after a lot of conversation that they wanted us to apply for it. So we may have some more
I
funds.
should disclose that my wife is on the board,
Thank her.
and I serve, just as a
Thank you.
disclosure, conflict of interest.
Yep, thank you.
And I actually serve on a committee,
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
the DEI committee, so it has nothing to do with this, but.
Okay. So I just want to let you know that would happen pretty fast.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to
good
miss that
news.
opportunity, so. Any questions about that?
We're so lucky in Cook County. We have so many resources available to us that aren't anywhere else, like IRR and Lloyd K. And it's incredible.
And so on and so
You know,
on.
yeah,
Yep.
awesome.
Thank you for hearing all of that.
Thank
That's all
you
I have.
for
That's all?
reporting all of that.
That's all.
Yeah, what you been doing?
More next time, I promise.
Slow time of year.
Sitting on my laurels.
Okay. Well, next on the agenda is committee reports. I don't know, do we have any committee reports? Finance?
I think the finance committee is just happy that we have a bookkeeper and our audit is done for this year, and we've selected an auditor for next year. And with that, the heavy load is off our shoulders for the time being, except I don't know anything about QuickBooks, so this is going to be pretty
That'll be
interesting.
fun for you.
But that is a step, and we talked at the last meeting about the current state of the financial statements that we have, which basically the ledger reports. And
Yeah.
So QuickBooks will be
It'll be-
a
Yeah,
tool
it'll
to
be much
produce
A better look at things, yeah.
more understandable financial
understandable.
statements.
Yeah. Awesome. And our budget is in place for 2024, and here we go. All right.
Should be a good year.
It should be. We're gonna get those golden shovels out of the closet on a
couple
number
of
of
times.
occasions with
Yeah.
any luck at all.
I hope we keep them out.
All right. The spray painted gold shovels.
Yeah, thank you for qualifying that.
No government excess going on here.
Real ones are much harder to handle.
They keep disappearing. All right, I'm just gonna go down the row and ask any commissioner items? Commissioner Sullivan?
I'm just really pleased with the progress we've made in 2023 and 2024. We're going to knock the socks
I hope so.
off this. Really exciting.
Commissioner Hawkins? Anything to report?
Nothing.
Commissioner Olson?
Happy holidays.
Hanson?
Same.
O'Brien? Gabler?
I was just happy to hear the sand in Cook County isn't quicksand.
That's all we need.
I didn't say we didn't have quicksand. I would just like to say thank you for another year. This has been a wild ride for me. I'm very optimistic. Barring some force majeure act of God in the economy or something, I think we have a pretty good year in front of us. And there's a lot of people that are supporting us and a lot of eyes on Cook County. I know the state was really happy to have a project up here in Birchwood, and they're looking forward to helping other projects when we bring them to them. So very grateful to all of you for your work and support. I could not do this. I still have the best board I've ever had, and I just want to continue to say that. Not lip service. I feel very grateful. Thank you, and don't forget to grab a snack, please, as you exit the premises.
And
Great.
the last, final, this is just a card with messages of good wishes for you and.
Work harder.
Yeah. We'd like to.
Just the opposite, take some time off over the holidays.
Right, enjoy some time off. All right.
Well, and express our gratitude to your sainted wife for putting up with your schedule and then doing our logo and all sorts of
Yes.
stuff, which has been actually a contribution that we appreciate. Please let her know.
Pro bono therapy for me goes a long way. So yeah, as a therapist, she's well equipped to deal with me. So.
All right. Well, there being no other business for this board, I look for a motion to adjourn.
Also move.
And a second.
I'll say.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
All right, stay home.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm interested